In 2026, somewhere in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, a small group of villagers walked out of a valley they had never left and met outsiders for the first time. They spoke a language no linguist had ever recorded. They are not the first to make this kind of walk this year. They will not be the last. Papua New Guinea, by the count of the linguistic database Ethnologue, contains 840 living languages. It is the most linguistically diverse country in the world. With 12 million people, it has roughly one language for every 14,000 citizens. By comparison, China has one language for every 8 million people. The United States, one for every 600,000. The country that comes second to PNG in linguistic density is its western neighbor, Indonesian-administered Papua, on the same island, with around 270 languages. The country that comes third is Nigeria, with 520. Papua New Guinea has more than the next two combined. This is the eastern half of the second largest island on Earth. 462,840 square kilometers, roughly the size of Sweden or California, split between independent Papua New Guinea and Indonesian-controlled West Papua, with a north-south border drawn straight down the 141st meridian. The country called Papua New Guinea in 2026 has a population of approximately 12 million. About 13% live in cities. The remaining 87% live in villages, hamlets, and forest clearings scattered across mountains so steep that in many regions the only way between two adjacent valleys is on foot by a trail that takes 3 days to walk. This is the story of an island so divided by geography that in 2026, with global broadband and satellite imagery and 50 years of Australian-built airstrips, there are still communities being contacted by the modern world for the first time. The island sits in the western Pacific, just south of the equator, between latitudes 1 and 12 degrees south. To its north lies the Bismarck Sea. To its south, the Coral Sea and Australia, 150 kilometers across the Torres Strait. To its east, the Solomon Sea and the long string of Melanesian archipelagos that extends to Fiji and Vanuatu. The terrain is the most extreme of any island its size. The central spine of the island, the highlands, is a continuous range of mountains rising to 4,884 meters at the summit of Mount Wilhelm. The peaks are so high that 3 degrees south of the equator, they hold permanent glaciers, among the few equatorial glaciers in the world. The valleys between the ranges are deep, narrow, and isolated. Rivers cut down through them in gorges that, until aircraft, were not crossable by any practical means. Rainfall in the wettest regions exceeds 6,000 millimeters per year, among the highest measurements on Earth. The lowland forests are some of the densest and most biodiverse in the world. The island has been inhabited continuously for an estimated 50,000 to 65,000 years. Archaeological evidence places its settlement among the oldest outside Africa. Agricultural cultivation in the highlands began approximately 9,000 years ago at the site of Cook Swamp in Western Highlands Province, independent of and roughly contemporaneous with the earliest agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. The local farmers domesticated taro, sugarcane, and banana. They built drainage ditches across swampland that are still visible from the air. Cook Swamp is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The mountains kept the people of these valleys separate. Genetic studies show that some highland populations have been isolated from one another at the level of breeding contact for thousands of years. Languages diverged, cultures diverged. Within an area smaller than the state of Texas, communities developed entirely separate vocabularies, kinship systems, ritual practices, and concepts of the world. This is the reason for the 840 languages. European explorers, beginning with the Portuguese navigator Jorge de Menezes in 1526, named the island and charted its coasts. But the interior of New Guinea remained into the 20th century almost entirely unknown to outsiders. The reason was the terrain. The coastal mangrove swamps were malarial. The mountains beyond them appeared on every map as a continuous green void. No European expedition reached the Central Highlands until 1930. In that year, 3 Australian gold prospectors, the brothers Mick and Dan Leahy, with a colleague named Mick Dwyer, entered the unexplored Waggi Valley. They expected forest and mountain. They found instead a population. The valley contained an estimated 1 million people. They lived in organized villages. They farmed sweet potatoes, a crop introduced to the highlands roughly 350 years earlier through pre-colonial trade routes, at densities supporting dense agricultural populations. They had stone tools. They had no metal. They had never seen a white person. The film footage shot by Mick Leahy on this expedition, and on his subsequent expeditions in the early 1930s, survives. It is one of the most important anthropological documents of the 20th century. It shows the moment of first contact from both sides, recorded as it happened. Some of the Highlanders interviewed later in the 1980s documentary First Contact recalled believing the Leahys were returned spirits of the dead, because the white skin, the strange clothes, the metal tools and rifles did not correspond to anything in the lived experience of the valley. The Leahys found in 1933 in the Mount Hagen area a population that had never been in contact with the wider world. That single highland region had been settled by genetic and archaeological measurement for at least 40,000 years. The country that would emerge from this geography was governed by Australia under a League of Nations mandate from 1920 and a UN trusteeship from 1949. Independence came on September 16, 1975. Papua New Guinea is, in 2026, a parliamentary democracy and a member of the Commonwealth, with the British monarch as nominal head of state. The official languages number 3, English, Tok Pisin, an English-based Creole that is, in practice, the country's lingua franca, and Hiri Motu, a simplified version of the Motu language of the southern coast. Tok Pisin is the most widely spoken language in the country. An estimated 4 million people speak it as a first or second language. It is the language of parliament, newspapers, and radio. Beyond it, the 840 indigenous languages range from those with hundreds of thousands of speakers — Enga in the highlands has around 300,000 — to those spoken by fewer than 50 people. Several dozen languages are believed to have, as of 2026, fewer than 10 remaining speakers. The Bougainville language Kuat has approximately 1,500 speakers. The language Tayap of Gapun village in East Sepik province is estimated to have fewer than 50. Several Papuan language families are not provably related to any other language family on Earth. The Trans-New Guinea family, by far the largest, contains over 470 languages. The Sepik languages, around 50. The Torricelli languages, about 50. There are also dozens of language isolates, languages with no known relatives in any other family, anywhere. This is, in linguistic terms, the most complex country on the planet. The cultural diversity matches the linguistic. The country contains, by recent ethnographic estimate, more than 1,000 distinct cultural and ethnic groups. The highlands are home to societies like the Huli, the Anga, the Chimbu, the Mendi, peoples known for elaborate body decoration, ritualized warfare, ceremonial pig exchanges, and ancestral spirit beliefs. The Huli Whig men of Gila province grow their own hair, cut it, and weave it into ceremonial headdresses decorated with bird of paradise feathers and bright pigments. The Sepik River region, in the country's north, is home to peoples whose ritual life centers on initiation. Among the Kanangara, Iatmul, and several other Middle Sepik groups, young men undergo scarification ceremonies in which a male elder cuts the initiate's skin in patterns evoking the back of a crocodile, the ancestral spirit. The wounds are packed with clay and ash so that the scars rise raised and lifelong. The ceremony commemorates the belief that humans descend from a crocodile that swam in the Sepik in mythic time. The scars are visible across the men's backs, chests, and shoulders for the rest of their lives. In the Trobriand Islands, off the southeastern coast, a Polynesian-influenced society practices forms of yam-based gift exchange and seasonal sexual freedom that the British anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, in his 1929 book The Sexual Life of Savages, made one of the most studied societies in 20th century anthropology. The Trobriand cricket, a local adaptation of the British colonial sport into a ceremonial dance and game complex involving war chants, body paint, and theatrical celebration, has been the subject of multiple documentary films. In the Western Highlands, the people of Mount Hagen have, since the 1960s, gathered each year for the Mount Hagen Cultural Show, a festival at which dozens of tribes wear full ceremonial dress and perform their traditional dances together. Bird of paradise feathers, pig tusk nose pieces, ochre body paint, woven grass skirts, and headdresses 2 meters tall are common. The show originated, in part, as a colonial-era effort to channel intertribal rivalry into peaceful display. It is, in 2026, one of the largest tribal gatherings in the world that is not a religious pilgrimage. The country was, until well into the 20th century, the site of practices that other societies had abandoned millennia earlier. The most discussed of these is endo-cannibalism, the ritual consumption of dead kin. The Fore people of the Eastern Highlands, prior to government and missionary intervention in the 1950s, practiced a mortuary ritual in which the body of a deceased relative was consumed by close family members. The custom was not, ethnographically, an act of violence. It was an act of grief and reincorporation. The body of the dead was reabsorbed into the kin group. In the 1950s, an epidemic neurodegenerative disease, called Kuru in the Fore language, swept the Fore territory. It killed an estimated 2,500 people, predominantly women and children, between roughly 1957 and the 1980s. Researchers, most notably the American physician Daniel Carlton Gajdusek, who won the 1976 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for the work, traced the disease to the funerary cannibalism. The infectious agent was identified as a prion, the same class of agent later understood to cause mad cow disease. The discovery of prions through Kuru research is, in 2026, one of the more important contributions to global medical science from a single tribal population. The Fore stopped funerary cannibalism in the late 1950s. The last new infections of Kuru were diagnosed in the early 2010s. Other practices that older ethnographic literature documented, the smoking and curation of mummified ancestors among the Anga peoples, the head-taking traditions of certain coastal groups, the ritual homosexual semen transfer practices of the Sambia of the Eastern Highlands, as documented by the anthropologist Gilbert Hurt in the 1970s, have in most cases ended or been transformed by Christianity, modernization, and external contact. The country, in 2026, is overwhelmingly Christian. Roughly 95% of citizens identify with one of the country's Catholic, Lutheran, Pentecostal, or evangelical denominations. But the country has remained, in many of its regions, only partially integrated into the global economy. The single road that, on a map, appears to cross the Highlands Highway, is, in much of its length, an unpaved track, regularly cut by landslides and tribal disputes. Air travel is the dominant mode of long-distance transit. Papua New Guinea has approximately 560 airstrips, the highest per capita count of any country on Earth. Most of them grass strips serving single villages, single mission stations, or single mining operations. It is along these airstrips that contact, in 2026, continues to expand. The Papua New Guinea National Statistics Office has acknowledged that the precise number of communities never previously visited by government officials is unknown, but is, in 2026, no longer zero. Anthropologists working in the country distinguish between fully isolated peoples, believed to be very few, possibly none, and recently contacted peoples, whose contact with the wider society remains intermittent and incomplete. The Indonesian-administered western half of the island contains, by some estimates, more uncontacted communities than any region outside the Amazon basin. The political situation in West Papua, where an active independence movement has been in conflict with Indonesian security forces since the 1960s, means these communities are inaccessible to outside observation. The economy of independent Papua New Guinea is, in 2026, dominated by extractive industries. The country exports gold, copper, liquefied natural gas, palm oil, and timber. The OK Tedi mine in Western Province was, at its 1990s peak, one of the largest copper and gold mines in the world. Its environmental record is among the worst in modern mining history. An estimated 2 billion tons of waste rock and tailings were discharged into the OK-Teddy and Fly River systems between 1984 and 2013, devastating downstream villages and ecosystems. The mine remains in operation in 2026, now under majority Papua New Guinean government ownership. The Porgera mine in the highlands has been intermittently closed since 2020 amid disputes between the government and the operator. The LNG project, ExxonMobil led, came online in 2014 and produces a substantial portion of the country's GDP. The benefit, by every measurement, has accrued unevenly. Papua New Guinea ranks 156th out of 191 countries on the UN Human Development Index. Life expectancy is approximately 65 years. Maternal mortality is one of the highest in the Pacific. Approximately 40% of the population lives below the international poverty line. A village in the highlands in 2026 may have a satellite phone, an Australian-run mission school, a one-room health post, and a cell of evangelical missionaries from South Korea. It may also, 2 days' walk from any of these, have ritual elders who remember the first time they saw an aircraft fly over the valley. Both things in this country can be true of the same village. The forest, in many places, has not changed. The Indonesian and Papuan halves of the island together hold an estimated 7% of the world's species, in around 0.5% of its land area. There are, by recent counts, 38 of the 42 known species of birds of paradise on the island. There are tree kangaroos that are found nowhere else. There are echidnas that lay eggs and feed their young on milk, surviving relics of a mammalian lineage that diverged from the rest of the world's mammals roughly 200 million years ago. There are fish that climb trees, frogs the size of dimes, and orchids that flower in shapes that, until they were photographed in the past decade, science had no record of. The country called Papua New Guinea is, by almost every measurement, a country of edges. The edge of the continent, the edge of the Pacific, the edge of geological history, sitting on the Pacific Ring of Fire with active volcanoes that in 1949 buried the city of Rabaul, the edge of biological diversity, the edge of human linguistic and cultural variation, the edge of contact between the modern world and human ways of life that, in much of the rest of the planet, ended thousands of years ago. In 2026, somewhere in the Central Cordillera, a missionary plane lands on a grass strip a kilometer long, in a valley reached for the first time in human memory by air. The pilot has a radio. He has a satellite phone. The villagers gathered at the strip have known of the plane only in the sense that they have heard, in recent years, the distant sound of engines over their mountains. What they say to him, he records. The language is unfamiliar. He sends the recording, eventually, to a linguist at the University of Papua New Guinea. The linguist begins the work of placing it within or beyond the 840 already documented. The work in this country has not ended. The island that human beings reached 50,000 years ago is, in 2026, still being mapped by the human beings who already live on it.